This is an unboxing video for Hollyland's first 4K transmitter. Hollyland has sent this to us for free in exchange for an unbiased review. Let's get to it. So in the box, we have receiver, transmitter. I like the color code. I like the metal finish. We have a DC adapter. We have a USB-C to USB connection. I'm not sure what that does just yet. We have this nice little hot shoe adapter that will go on the back of these, which you can mount to anything. That's super cool. And then we have an extra antenna. Hopefully we don't need that ever. My first impression, I love the feel. I love the look, and I love how simple this kit is. I'm gonna hand it over to David to go through all of the tech specs.
Awesome. The first thing to know about these is that although they advertise it as being a 4K transmitter, it is actually a UHD transmitter. You're not gonna get a full 4K resolution out of these. These do offer both HDMI and SDI ports on both the transmitter and receiver, and they will cross convert for you. So if you want to go HDMI in on the transmitter and SDI out on the receiver, that is totally fine. And if you want to go SDI in on the transmitter and HDMI out on the receiver, that's also fine. The receiver will also output both SDI and HDMI together, so no stress there if you want to use both video outputs simultaneously. However, the SDI port will be 1080. You need to go HDMI in on the transmitter and HDMI out on the receiver in order to get that resolution. Any other configuration will be 1080. All the frame rates that these are compatible with for input can be seen right here. So the latency on these guys is going to be 66 milliseconds. That is the claim from Hollyland. Now 66 milliseconds in the grand scheme of things is not ultra low latency. Although they claim ultra low latency, 66 milliseconds is gonna have a slight noticeable latency for it, which for most purposes is gonna be totally fine. The only time I would say this might be an issue is if you're trying to use these for focus pulling. I would not recommend these for focus pulling. I would recommend spending a little more money on a transmitter that can achieve lower latency, but for a director's monitor, these are fantastic. The Mars 4K supports wireless transmission to iOS devices over Wi-Fi, just like many of their other previous transmitters. However, there's a few things you need to note when using iOS or Android devices with this transmitter. You can only transmit up to a maximum of 4 end sources at any point. So this can be a combination. So if you want to use just this transmitter without the receiver and only transmit to iOS and Android devices, like tablets or phones, you can transmit to up to 4. However, as soon as you introduce this receiver, now you can only transmit to 2 iOS and Android devices and 2 of these receivers. So you can use one of these transmitters with 2 of these receivers, but then you are limited to 2 iOS or Android devices on that same network also receiving. So you're limited to a total of 4. You can also pair these with the Mars M1 monitor transceiver if you want to transmit to that device to or from. Understand that you must obey the same amount of total devices that you're transmitting or receiving from, and to. In regards to range, you're gonna get up to 450 feet line of sight range. However, I never ever recommend that anybody take this as a realistic range test because you're almost always going to be using these in an indoor scenario. So my rule of thumb is to take roughly a quarter of that spec and use that as your rough guesstimate for how far these are going to transmit indoors. So assume that through a few walls you might get about 100 feet. And for most indoor purposes, that's going to be totally fine as it allows you to be on a different floor, a few rooms over, probably even next door with no problems. I gotta say that I do love the bullet style antennas. These are super sleek and nice and short, so they're not gonna get caught on things and it can keep your rig nice and compact. These have a really solid, rugged metal shell, which I love to see because it means long-lasting durability. It also features electrostatic discharge protection, something I haven't seen advertised in the past. We have 4 power options for the transmitter and receiver. First, you can use a Sony NPF battery directly on the back as they both feature Sony NPF plates. Second, you can use a DC wall adapter. Third, you can use the USB port on the side. And lastly, you can use a D-tap to DC barrel connector and power this with a V-mount. The low battery indicator is super obvious on these as the screen will flash red, letting you know that you do not have much time left and that you need to swap the battery. That is also a really helpful piece because there's been a few times during live streams where our transmitters or receivers have died on us with very little to no warning as they only give a small voltage indicator in the top corner. If noise is a big issue for you and you need that dead silence on your set, These fans are very quiet, but you can also turn them into a quiet mode to make them even more silent. Thank you, Hollyland, for sending these to us. We're super happy with how they've performed with us so far, and we're super excited for future products.